It is 10 o'clock and it's still Tuesday, November 12th, 2024. It's my fourth meeting for the morning already, so we're rolling. We're here to discuss shared stewardship and cross-boundary management with the Forest Service and IDL. And I don't know who's going first, so I'll turn it over to you guys.
I think I'm going first.
Okay.
So, for the record, I'm Ira Andrea, and I am the Shared Stewardship Coordinator for the state of Idaho. I work primarily in the IDL Coeur d'Alene office, but increasingly I work down in our Boise and Macomb offices too, in the Shared Stewardship landscape down south. So, Shared Stewardship is an initiative in the state that was brought about by agreement that was signed by then Governor Little and, then Governor Otter and Governor-elect Little in December of 2018, and also the Undersecretary of USDA, as well as the regional foresters from the Forest Service. So what we did underneath then the Forest Service chief's charge was to break down those traditional interagency silo walls, especially between the Forest Service and state governments, and try to really increase the pace and scale of active management on the national forests, as well as greatly increase the pace and scale of fuels reduction work across those national forest boundaries. So get the big project work done and the active management going on the national forest, and radiate that outward in an interagency, cooperative, especially with the counties, kind of program where we can increase that pace and scale of work on private lands next to the national forest. So we signed the agreement in 2018, and what it is truly an initiative. It is not a program. I don't have staff. Jeff doesn't have staff. We are just there to build those relationships and truly make an interagency collaborative process to get more fuels reduction work on federal, state, tribal, and private lands, forest lands. So one of the first things we did after the agreement was signed is we worked with the forest supervisors, as well as the regional foresters, and said, in all of our analyses that the Forest Service or the state has done, where's our highest risk, I call it insect and disease type of areas in our forest lands, combined with the highest fire risk areas that we've done with modeling and numerous amounts of looking backwards to determine. Where are the places on our map of Idaho that shine red in those two areas and are thus the highest risk for experiencing damage from wildfire? We decided on delineating about 2 million acre landscapes, shared stewardship landscapes, one in the north and one in the south, as you see there. And then, next slide, in 2022, there was some discussion about changing and extending the boundary of the southern landscape. So you can see we go down there way into Boise County. Now we've added that particular area. So those modifications to the southern landscape were done in 2022. And now we've got the crosshatched areas, which are our primary focal areas. Those are the cross-boundary project areas where we focus on more at 100 to 150,000 acre project area, and focused around those county cooperators that are in each of those crosshatched areas. So here, obviously, we're in the northern shared stewardship priority landscape. Across the state, we have 3 national forests participating in our cross-boundary work in both priority landscapes. The Idaho Panhandle is the only one up here. And then down south in our priority landscape, we have the Payette and the Boise National Forest. And then just to give you an idea, so in our big cross-boundary toolbox that we use to get all this work done at a greater scale, one of the biggest tools to get that work increased is Good Neighbor Authority. So our IDL Good Neighbor Authority foresters can use our more expedited contract timber sale processes, contracting and timber sale processes to do active management on the national forest. So state foresters running the Good Neighbor Authority program go on to the national forest, following all the same procedures, but can expedite some of the processes, and we can use our contracting ability to help pad the teams, to get the NEPA work done, to get the active management going on the ground. So those green stars are, and we've added some more since, are projects that have either been completed or are active on the whole state, on the national forest administered by state Good Neighbor Authority foresters. So after we designated the 2 landscapes, in my opinion, the best thing we did with the Forest Service is create an agreement that allows IDL to pay, not quite, but approximately half of 2 National Forest employees' salaries. And those National Forest employees will be the true shared stewardship cross-boundary orchestra leaders. They will have all the knowledge of the National Forest budgeting and management processes. They will sit in IDL offices and act and become acquainted with all of our processes. And they will act with our NGO and county cooperators especially, with the knowledge of both and as an agent of both, saying we are really here to get both agencies, federal and state, working together to help you get work done on private lands next to the National Forest. And so that agreement was signed, done. We pay money to the Forest Service to have these people housed and share in our offices. Jeff sits in our Coeur d'Alene staff office right down the road, and his counterpart down south, Brian, sits in our Payette Lakes McCall office down south. So he is the main person that has worked with the 4 northern counties, well, 3 northern counties, and then now we're working with Shoshone County up in our priority landscape, has been extremely successful building trust, building relationships, getting county, state, especially the local district rangers, the Forest Service together in a truly forward-moving fashion. And I will let him get into the specifics of the North Idaho landscape since he's here.
Yeah, thank you. So, just real quick, Jeff Lau, the Northern Shared Stewardship Coordinator. So I am half funded by the state, but I am a Forest Service employee. I sit in the IDL office, and I'm kind of hub or coordinator, facilitator of the conversations, and also help with similar things that Tyler presented to you guys earlier, CWDG, different types of grant funding sources, basically facilitate those conversations with a large group of partners working together. So when we run into speed bumps or capacity constraints, the big we can have a conversation about how do we overcome those. So that's a big portion of what I do. At any point, we put together a PowerPoint, but at any point, if you have questions or want to stop, you can interrupt me. I'll be stumbling through some of these notes anyway, so if it doesn't make sense, I probably skip something on my notes. So don't hesitate to stop me. But first off, I wanted to start off with a little bit of history as it pertains to shared stewardship and the cross-boundary effort, primarily in the northern landscape. Just to characterize the northern landscape, it's 2 million acres in size that was designated by the shared stewardship effort, the governors and the regional foresters, to kind of paint a picture of why it's so important for us to work at cross-boundary at that scale, not just at our individual ownership. 51% of this designated landscape is private lands. 39% of that is private non-industrial lands. So there comes Bill's program as well as one of our partners, NRCS program, holding one of the largest chunks, right? Small non-industrial private landowners being a huge chunk of the pie, and why it's so significant that our programs kind of mesh together across those boundaries. public land is only 41% of that landscape. So collectively, private land is significantly more, or at least half. One of the land managers that we haven't talked about, obviously, they'll play a big role down here in Shoshone County, is the BLM. They've worked in the Silver Valley for years. They're coordinating a lot with Luke, as well as Holly when it comes to the projects. I want to start off with giving a little bit of history. I guess just bear with me if you can. The agreement was signed in December of 2018, and September through December of 2019, we spent a significant amount of our time collaborating and identifying land management objectives across all these administrative boundaries. And as does any good plan, we started off with communication. And so we hosted a meeting with leadership from anybody that we can get to come to the table, such as Forest Service, IDL, Natural Resource Conservation Service, or NRCS, BLM, and like we're visiting with you all today, we had County Emergency Management represented there as well. As we increased and improved our communication with our partners, we've been able to develop stronger relationships, and we've learned a little bit about each other's programs and the strengths of those programs. So when we run into speed bumps or hurdles, the big we can come up with ways to get over those hurdles, because most of the time they're not roadblocks, they're just a speed bump, right? And a lot of us have different tools in the toolbox that can be brought forth to overcome those. This group also identified the need, given that we have a 2 million acre landscape, to come up with a more clear, direct, or focus our attention on some initial cross-boundary work within the landscape, because we can't focus on 2 million acres all at once. And that's what Ara alluded to with those focal areas. So what we did as a group is we knew, especially working with federal agencies, that their program of work is fixed for several years, and then there's wiggle room to have discussions about what to do, like on that 3-year horizon. So what we did with all the partners is we yarded the partners together, including private landowner partners such as counties, to share each other's program of work, so we could see where our common interests, our projects overlapped or had some sort of spatial relation to each other, so we could identify some initial areas to start working together in a cross-boundary effort. So up here on the map is just a visual display of the data that we pulled together. So the red and green is Forest Service projects. The big polygons are planning. They don't really have the treatment, but they're going to do a project in that area. Blue is IDL, and as we work with our private lands partners, NRCS and the counties, yellow represents the areas that they had significant interest in or community support. Fourth here represents the 2 initial focal areas that we identified to invest our energy and efforts in. The one in Bonner County, properly named Bonner County Focal Area, as well as the Kootenai County Focal Area. Bonner was stood up initially. We're creative. Bonner was really the first one out of the gate. We had a cooperative that was ready to go. We had a project that was stood up that had IDL, the GNA support, doing all the ground reconnaissance. So we just had a lot of layers that overlap. So that's why that one kicked off in 2020. As you can see, it's just kind of a mess of colors. I don't know. Right here, that's Bonner County. You guys know. And then Kootenai County was shortly after, maybe 6 to 9 months as we stood up those relationships. And most recently, a few more layers, a little bit more data. We identified just about a year ago, not quite a year ago, a focal area up in Boundary County focal area. And so we're kind of running on that timeline as projects get identified, and there's lots of overlap and opportunity for us to integrate projects, really to kind of set the time frame of when we engage with the big we, all the partners at the table. How do we get work done on the ground? building off of the existing partnerships established here in Shoshone County, for example. We are planning to identify a focal area within Shoshone County with the support of you all, Bill's input, whoever we can get to the table to identify that polygon. CWDG, whatever that polygon becomes, might be something that guides where we draw that line. But the reality is where we draw the line doesn't necessarily dictate if we do work there or not. It will, but if there's opportunities outside of that project area, we can go there as well. Here's just a partial list of the organizations and programs that we are working in close collaboration with to get treatments done on private lands in the northern landscape. Big one to offset capacity, because a lot of times when we show up, usually it leads to a little bit more work on the ground, which means more work on folks like Bill and others that support Bill, as well as NRCS. So we have contracted in support of the 3 northern focal areas, private forestry consultants, and we have a GNA shared stewardship coordinator, so that's another 50-50. So that's a half of a person to work alongside of NRCS, Bill, and IDL's private forestry specialists. As landowners express interest to any one of those agencies, we want to be as responsive as possible. So those individuals can help out with site visits, education, that sort of thing, those initial interactions with the private landowner.
Jeff, when you say we contracted, can you specify who the we is that holds that contract?
So IDL holds a contract for the northern landscape with Inland Forest Management, and which has allowed us to bring on additional forestry support. Kootenai County and Boundary County have Inland Forest Management under contract to implement the work that Bill implements, so it's a little bit different than here. Shoshone County program or structures emulates a lot of is very similar to Bonner County, but these foresters do similar work when it comes to engaging the landowner, speaking to them about what the need is, the fire risk, what the opportunities and programs are. So the we is IDL.
Yeah.
Has that individual under contract. So.
And these consulting foresters can help Bill in the efforts that he's got going with Tire's money, all IDL's money, all over the county. And wherever your community wildfire protection plan says, wherever Bill and Tire and we have all decided this is high priority, and Bill, I can't get that done. I can't get the contracting done. I can't get the layout. That's where our contract with these consulting foresters can help, and then pull some people in to help.
Yeah, so I mean, just to add on to that, the overall objective is to bring some additional resources to the table to assist with the coordination of those treatments on the ground on all ownerships. GNA shared stewardship forester. That forester might be laying out a Forest Service fuels project or a timber sale, and they might have interactions with private landowner. That's just a natural transition. They just flip on that other hat and can speak to that private landowner about what the opportunities are for them and the programs that are available. The hope is that we can enhance this already successful program that Shoshone County, that you all run here, just by adding that little bit of additional capacity and providing a opportunity to have conversations when we get to that. So when I think CWDG, when you look at the programs that were selected nationally, those are big pots of money. So a lot of times that might, to an existing program, that might exceed the program's capacity, whether that's people, and in other counties, the constraint might be funding, so we can pursue the funding. So we have ways to pursue additional funding and ways to offset existing capacity. Sorry, this is really a long slide. Let me see if I can. Yeah, so one of the things that I wanted to highlight is working in a cross-boundary group allows us to compete for a variety of funding sources even better. Even if the grant funding source doesn't necessarily require you to be working in a cross-boundary group type of avenue, just because of the human nature side of the equation. A lot of times, the more people that you have there at the table in support, it's harder to say no. It also opens up opportunities for unique funding sources to compete well. One that I wanted to highlight today, I'm not necessarily advocating that Shoshone County pursue this particular funding source, but I'm going to share it with you guys just because it kind of highlights, it's a good example of how the cross-boundary group has been working in the other counties to build the capacity and get more work done and in a coordinated manner. And that's, is that it? Skip 2 minutes.
There it is.
And so that is the Joint Chiefs Landscape Restoration Partnership. Is a program that the Chief of the Forest Service and the Chief of the NRCS developed, I would say, a little over a decade ago to fund cross-boundary work on national forest lands and surrounding state and private lands. So it's really that first program that I'm aware of, or a big program that's out there that goes beyond just the bill and the IRA last 2 or 3 years, that has been long running. And the money that comes down associated with this can come to the Forest Service, the NRCS, and our proposals are some of the first proposals. The scattered lands, the one that's up here on the screen, was one of the earlier ones that requested funding to come to through the Forest Service's state and private forestry funnel, which goes to the state and then is sub-granted, very similar to the hazardous fuels reduction and Western State Managers grant. So the funding looks, feels, smells the same. It uses that existing funnel to get that money to the county. The Scattered Lands Hazardous Fuels Project is just about 174,000 acres in size, identified by the cross-boundary group. We put a proposal together with over 4,500 treatment acres to be funded associated with the proposal. And I'll just give you a quick rundown. Partners at the table for this were IDL, Forest Service, NRCS, Bonner County. Later in the process, Stinson Lumber Company, Avista, and when I get to the second proposal, the group just gets larger. Thought I progressed it. All right, so here's just a quick summary of the accomplishments, broken up by the 3 agencies that received funding associated with the proposal. So on your guys' the Bonner County, really we should be moving up about 220 acres up there. I just didn't get a chance to move those numbers in my spreadsheet or PowerPoint, but we've treated, associated with this proposal, we've treated just over 3,000 acres associated with that funding. And why that's significant is this is above and beyond the program that Bonner County already had in place. They had Western State Fire Managers grant funding coming in. They had HFR grant funding coming in. And this is additional funding to do more than that, what I'll call the county's baseline program. So about 220 acres, it's still being implemented. It will be about 300 acres by the end of this field season, was accomplished above and beyond what they originally planning over the course of those 3 years. So they bumped up their acres about 100 acres a year associated with that funding, which is a big deal to non-industrial private landowners. NRCS, about 1,000 acres, and the Forest Service, just shy of 2,000 acres. Just to throw kudos out there to the state, the G&A shop implemented all of those 2,000 acres on behalf of the Forest Service while coordinating with their fuel specialists. So once again, an agency offsetting that capacity constraint that we sometimes have. I shared this slide because I wanted to add in the cumulative. For the Forest Service, the project associated with this both had commercial removal and non-commercial. So that first slide was just non-commercial. So when you add on the commercial side that was directly coordinated under this effort, we're up to about 5,500 acres that originally wasn't on the docket to be completed. I'm going to point back just real quick. Cumulatively with the partners associated and being coordinated with this Joint Chiefs and this cross-boundary group, the funding paid for about 3,100 acres, the 200 acres I forgot. But cumulatively, we coordinated close to 16,000 acres of treatment within that landscape. So I wanted to point that out. I missed it on that slide, but what the funding paid for and what was collectively coordinated are two completely different things, right? Money only goes so far. What I wanted to highlight on this slide, outside of that additional commercial associated with the cumulative of the top table, I think this is the big highlight for me of this project, because we were able to connect with 845 residents directly associated with the Joint Chiefs outreach and education. In-person site visits, there were 184 landowners that received either an IFM, contracted forester, IDL, PFS, county site visit. Someone went and walked their property, provided them recommendations, and as you can see, we also worked with the University of Idaho Extension Program. They hosted workshops in the project area, just another way for us to connect with landowners, because getting a treated acre is a desire, whether we help offset that or they do it themselves, but educated public is probably one of the biggest successes. So this only 1,100 residents in that landscape represents 16,529 acres of ownership. This does not account for the first year. We created a database so we could track this interest. So we make sure that a landowner that expresses interest is followed up with a professional forester, a BIL, one of our foresters, IDL, PFS, all the way through to completion of the treatment on the ground, or they chose to go their other way. We can track that. The first year we couldn't. We didn't have the database in place. So there's probably about 20-25% of the landowners we missed. Plus NRCS was unable to share their information. So just showing the natural progression, that was fiscal year 20, federal fiscal year 22 through 24 funding. And because of the success of that program and the momentum we were building in Kootenai County as well as Boundary County, all the cooperators that we were currently working with under the shared stewardship umbrella said, hey, let's go for round two. And so we submitted another Joint Chiefs proposal that was selected just this last summer. And you can see the numbers that we're looking at completing with associated work there. Cumulatively, close to 80,000 acres of treatment are identified. The proposal requested funding for about 10% of those treatments. So we have a program that's already existing. We wanted to do a little bit more, so this gives us the opportunity to fund an additional 10%, which is quite significant, 8,000 acres. But once again, I'm sharing this program to show that the progression working cross-boundary in this collaborative nature and having these conversations similar to what you all are already having with Luke and Holly associated with the I-90 corridor, there's an opportunity to have facilitated discussions to pursue, whether it's CWDG, Joint Chiefs funding, or if the capacity constraint is just bodies, we can help with that. And this is currently being implemented. I will be honest, associated with this, we didn't see a chunk of this funding come through for the state and private tribal forestry side. But once again, because we have the group together, that was about $1 million, or no, $500,000 this year we didn't receive, and we were supposed to. But the cross-boundary group is doing everything we can to offset that portion of the pie that we didn't get associated with this proposal yet. All right, I'm just about done. now that the ball's rolling in all 3 northern focal areas and associated counties, and with the Idaho Panhandle's designation of multiple projects in the I-90 corridor, it just seemed that the timing was right for us to start having conversations about pulling together a similar group, a similar forum to have conversations with you all at Shoshone County, and over the course of this winter, stand up that working group, as well as identify what we call focal areas. That's probably not the biggest priority where the line goes, but it's a way for us to show we are working together and we're investing more energy in this portion of the county. And I'll leave it there because I might have talked some folks into submission. Bill was like, "Come on."
This before and after picture here is from a project we just completed and I've done lots of field tours on. This is on the Post Falls Community Forest, administered by Kootenai County. So it'd be similar.
The project was administered by Kootenai County.
The project was, yes, what did I say?
And it was Post Falls City.
Yeah.
Yes, Post Falls City owns this 500 acres. But
So
getting lots of good feedback.
Tyre has some pots of money that you guys have been pursuing, and it sounds like CWDG, the Shared Stewardship group, has small pots of money for demonstration type projects, and or to finish out or round out projects that maybe Bill is, when you implement projects on the ground, more interest. A lot of times you stir up interest just by the good work, and maybe that funding came with the HFR grant falls $20,000 short because you had 2 or 3 more landowners raise their hand. Having this group come together, you can bring that up as a conversation piece, and the big we can figure out how to fund that and make sure that we round out that funding source when possible. But
And these cross-boundary teams in Kootenai, Bonner, and boundary counties, we meet depending on how intense the cross-boundary project work's going. We meet monthly to quarterly. When we're meeting monthly, I mean the whole team's there. The district ranger and field specialist, to NRCS, district conservationists sitting at the table, Tyre, me, Jeff, the county cooperators are all sitting at the table, and we're going to town. They're intense working meetings, and that cross-boundary cooperation is very evident and detailed, worked out.
a lot of times when we get really down into the weeds, the local fire chief that might be representing that area, other interested parties, just to inform where and how we might engage landowners. Sometimes we don't already have landowners that are raising their hand saying, "Hey, government, come help us out." In some areas we know that there's a need for education and actual formal outreach, and that's where we can help with that as well. So stirring up interest, if it's in an area where a fire chief is saying, this one way in, one way out.
Steep.
So at minimum, we can provide education, and if landowners choose not to participate, at least they knew the programs that were available to them or the need on their landscape, what to look for.
Also, if we find a high-risk area within the county's working project area, and we're having a hard time getting buy-in from the community, we'll work with that group to usually takes 4 significant high-visibility landowners to put in what we call demo sites. And then the phone will start ringing off, even if it's really tough to begin with, while we're knocking on the door, so to speak.
And those, typically we try to utilize funding on hand to not have to wait for the funding cycles that typically the grant funding you pursue. That's helped out in a lot of areas. create that interest with the demo site while we wait for that baseline program funding that you guys pursue on a regular basis to come through, if that's in need.
I'm kind of curious on with the public, what field do you have? Do you think they would already be knocking on the door? What does that look like currently?
Some.
Okay.
One of the problems we're still running into here in the county is even at the county level, they think we're big government. They don't want nothing to do with us.
Oh.
So, what usually happens is like, I'll take down the road here, Terra Gulch. 2019, we did a project there. We worked right through COVID on that project. And now, there's like, while we were there, 2 other landowners adjacent to the piece we were doing wanted work done. So we got the funding to retire and we did those projects. Now I've got like 6 other landowners in the area that want this work. My problem is I don't have the people to do the work.
Contractor?
Contractors.
Oh. You got the money.
I got the money. It's just the contractors.
Well, you all have some tough ground down here too, because a lot of the other counties that we're talking about, in the northern counties, they have machine ground.
Yep.
And so, I mean, up in Kootenai, Bonner, and Boundary, any way you throw a stick, you hit somebody that has a masticator. That doesn't really help you down here. So, I mean, that's one of those hurdles that the big we can have conversations about and figure out how to get over that hump.
And as the I-9 East project comes about, and we're talking big acres, that pulls operators in too. Makes it worth their time.
With the I-90, some of the, and looking at the map Luke has generated and stuff, and just kind of us talking back and forth, we've identified some places where, we could probably use machine, but the majority of the work is hand work, and swinging a chainsaw for 6 to 8 hours isn't really appealing to very many people anymore, like it used to be.
And those hand thinning crews that are good, we have found to be very expensive because they put down what price per acre they want.
So contractors and funding, because the work's expensive.
Tyler's used to that.
Is there opportunity? I'm looking at that list of folks, kind of like the brainstorming list. Where can or does like the power companies come into play, or could come into play? Because that could be something for I-90.
Absolutely. So several of our project areas, I mean, up in Boundary, very similar, the power company, Department of Transportation. So I think one of the tricks is getting them at the table at a monthly meeting is going to be challenging, but coming up and brainstorming and then having them come in quarterly to have those conversations. But Bonner County, we started stirring up enough interest with that first Joint Chiefs proposal, and Avista wanted a piece of it, plus they had a hazardous fuels program. And so they came to the table after the proposal and conveyed $150,000 to Bonner County to tag onto the work we were already coordinating, because we had a constraint, they had a funding source, and
we were able to actually write that agreement so that the money could be conveyed to dedicated accounts directly from Avista to Bonner County. And they held the money in dedicated accounts and then put it out on the ground, which is a big help, because originally Vista came to IDL, said, we just want to give you state all this money, you put it out in our customer service areas that are most at risk. And so we can mimic that in any other county now with a similar agreement, as long as your treasurers or.
But to your point, in each county, depending on what the focus is, we'll work with, like, hopefully you'll be able to sit there. Whoever Shoshone wants to be sitting at the table to have those discussions. Typically, it's the bill equivalents in the other counties, but in Boundary County, one of the county commissioners chooses to participate in the quarterly WUI meeting, and he feeds his information through that meeting to the shared stewardship group. But who to have at the table, you have to start with a core group, and then as the opportunities present themselves, that group could have a discussion about who would be the best person to reach out to the power company or Idaho Department of Transit, who already has the relationship. And so it's one of those benefits of having folks at the table, because someone might already have a working relationship, and that person would be the point of contact to bring them in and have the discussion.
I think a really prime example in Boundary County has been National Fish and Wildlife Service. Is that certain project that we were working on generated a lot of interest for them to participate in that, but it wasn't, the next project wasn't their thing. And they're still there, but not, depending on what the project is, like Jeff's saying, we'll bring the appropriate parties to the table to leverage the necessary tools and talents.
Yeah. This might be a bad analogy, but sometimes those partners are in the 2 line, right? Because they have an interest in a certain area or project, and sometimes they're in a CC line where we don't really have interest over there, but just kind of keep us in the loop.
Mm-hmm.
Another avenue that we can certainly facilitate contact with, in the other 3 counties, Stimson is our major industrial landowner, and have provided money, contracting services, all kinds of things to help us increase our G&A work on the Panhandle as well as the cross-boundary work. I think around here it's Manulife is the big one.
There's a fair bit of Stimson
Is there
too,
still-
and they have interest already around like our I-90 corridor project.
Then that's something we'll want to talk.
Stimson and Mulvis,
Yes.
I would say,
Okay.
both shared some interest.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of those connections already established. So, yeah, that's something else we want to talk about, because they have a huge interest in promoting anything that provides more security for their thousands of acres of fast-growing timber. Also, I think
They
of
have
this
a vested interest too, because where their land is located in reference to the homes in the valley, we need their land treated.
Who's that?
Stimson.
Stimson.
If you look at the ownership layer for the Silver Valley, like it's private, industry, federal ground.
And we're starting.
Just proximity-wise, the industry ground needs treatment as well.
And kind of indirect or direct in some cases, Stimson, similar to Bennett, a little bit further south of here, have changed a little bit of their land management practices in-house to address some of those concerns. So we've been seeing Stimson more and more over the last several years when they go in and do a pre-commercial thinning right next to a road. Typically, they're either piling or burning or masticating that work, and so they're seeing the merits. Bennett's doing it pretty much on all their lands that are accessible to the public, and so just getting industry to buy in and invest a little bit to secure their lands, and then also whether or not there's funding available, we can have those discussions. Another big one that I'll wear my Forest Service hat for a little bit is access for projects is going to be a big deal for all the I-90 projects. Getting access across that non-industrial private landowner. As Bill referenced, we are Forest Services definitely look like at big government, right? We're the feds, but the lower level of government, the less big in a lot of cases. But a few different people sharing the why and educating. We've seen some benefits of local fire chiefs being the best. Those volunteers. We had one meeting where the fire chief straight up said, we've already done property assessments and we've triaged your property and we will not be defending your property. Forest Service, we're not going to say that, but it was pretty powerful for a local fire chief to say, we can't put our firefighters in there safely. It's kind of that red zone. So this is why we brought these folks in to talk to you. Here's another avenue, or you do it yourself. That's what the fire chiefs are able to say. We're just, at my level, it's informing them of the concern, the forest health, and the associated fire risk, the programs that are available. But you can go a step further the closer to the ground you get.
I think the other local interest we potentially have, are just the 2 ski resorts. So one's on federal land, but Silver's not. And fire mitigation is a huge thing for them. And their fire insurance is through the roof if they can even afford it. So I think they would be somebody worth.
You're absolutely right, Holly, because I think of our landscape down south. Both ski hills are huge. Oh, you know about that. Both ski hills are huge. Tamarack as well as Brundage are big partners and doing lots of work on their properties and supporting surrounding properties.
Anybody else? Anything to contribute to this discussion? This is, pardon my learning curve here. This is a lot. I want to know why Shoshone County is the last one to get our own focal region.
I was wondering when that was going to come up, and that's why I left my PowerPoint. Hire has been advocating on behalf of Shoshone County for quite some time, but similar to everybody else, we all have our capacity constraints, right? So Era and I could only cover and stand up and truly invest energy in certain locations. When we got together initially with the cross-boundary group, where we sit here in Shoshone County, which one do you want to look at? Shoshone County, it's just a hot mess of projects and opportunities that already exist and overlap. The green that's showing up down here primarily came out of the Forest Service's last 5-year action plan and the focus in the fire crisis landscape. I'm getting the language wrong, but there was a project up here called Shoshone. So within this yellow, which is really where Era and I are supposed to significantly invest our energy, right? That's the designated landscape. There really wasn't hardly any projects identified on BLM, IDL, or Forest Service. So why now? Why the last? I wouldn't say last. Now we have an opportunity where we can coordinate project specific. We have opportunities to work with the Forest Service, you all at the table in collaboration saying, I would like to see you do more work here, provide input on those projects and engage. So now there's just the best opportunity because we have opportunities on multiple ownerships. A lot of this I-90 discussion with the Forest Service's startup is actually also nudged and emphasized the need for BLM to do projects in collaboration and coordination with the Forest Service. So we're just now seeing that big flux of work. Honestly, we probably could have started the discussion last year, but I was up here trying to get this going. But the groups in the 3 northern counties now, we kind of have a flow. It's working well. We'll call it the maintenance stage. So we have capacity to have that discussion, and it just lined up well. Because there was a discussion here or here, but there were just so many other projects that were implementation ready. These projects down here in Shoshone County they're in the planning process, so input can be provided and we can help direct those projects on federal land. But they're still several years out from implementation. So it's a good time for us to spend a year or this next year identifying and building the cross-boundary group so we can implement as soon as possible.
So kind of in a big picture, since we started doing in 2019, we have always started by consulting mainly with the district rangers and the Forest Service people working in the county and saying, where is your next NEPA-ready project going to happen? So you're looking at thousands of acres a lot of time, right, on the Forest Service? And then we radiate outwards. That's why scattered lands, which was kind of chosen as the 7,000 acres of the Panhandle getting worked on, all of it was administered by IDL Good Neighbor Authority foresters. Lots of high-risk private land on the outside. IDL lands were getting treated.
Boom. Had grant funding.
There we were. Yes,
there.
and Bonner County was successfully pulling in lots of fire grant funds, so that's where we started. So it's always been about, let's look at the next NEPA-ready project on the National Forest. and then radiate outwards. And so now we are here with the I-90 East project.
And a lot of those grant sources are actually tied to Forest Service projects in one way or another, whether it's TIRES program, HFR, or Joint Chiefs, or CWDG. I don't know if there's a spatial relation, but there's ties to the Forest Service needing to have projects going on.
And there's been an ongoing need that has not been forgotten by IDL. As you're aware, there have been regular awards that have come into the county for the implementation of work. So that's just the initial leverage to create that effective coordination as we continue to move forward, because we have footholds, strong footholds, frankly, in many communities that we've been working in, that you all have directed, or Bill has engaged and his predecessors in those communities as those leverage points to help with those conversations as we move forward.
Good.
I would say with the crisis strategy too, that kind of redirected the Forest Service on where we prioritize our NEPA projects. The fire managers within the Coeur d'Alene district have always recognized the I-90 as a risk, but a lot of times in the past our NEPA and projects were timber driven primarily, and now they're more fuels integrated. And if you look at the map, all that yellow boundary chases the WUI, and then if you look at our NEPA program of work, all of our polygons are basically in that WUI area. So I would say we're more fuels oriented now with our planning and focus. And with our fire history, 21 kind of kicked us into, we know with character fire knocking on the door of Kellogg, now's the time. We think we have the buy-in from the community. With the fire, another recent fire, not 1910, a recent fire threatening the valley, now's the time we can go after the interstate. People seen smoke threatening the valley. It was real. I think we have the story to tell to chase our project, knowing how hard it's going to be to implement that project.
And I think too, we heard on our field trip with I-90 East pretty loud and clear from the Shoshone-Vanawa Collaborative, where they stood up that collaborative for this area, for this corridor area. So, and they represent all parties, industry and private, you guys. So I think they can help us be that member to help with the community, you know, as we do that outreach piece for some of the folks who don't want to hear from Big Bad Uncle Sam. Sometimes it sounds better coming out of somebody else's mouth than mine. So I think we can lean on that a little bit, or some of those members maybe that fall within that collaborative.
There seems to be a fair amount of opportunities here too. The time just seems right.
I'm kind of, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was thinking, because it is, I know it's a lot to digest, but what would that next step look like?
Well, really the next step, from my perspective, based on how we've done these in the past, is to start drafting what Shoshone County focal area boundary would be, and knowing who you would like to be at the table to discuss that. A lot of times we'll draft something that we think might be the right fit, and then lob out to a medium-sized group, whether it's everybody that's here or just a portion, to get feedback on, well, maybe we should include up here, but the rough boundary, I mean, hearing what you're planning with CWDG, there's probably going to be already some efforts to draw a relative polygon bit. I don't know why I'm still on this one, but
Jeff, would there be any hesitancy to include the southern part of Shoshone County just to pick up some of the values along the St. Joe River basin?
Like within that Shoshone Fuels project area?
So
that rough polygon, yes, the one there.
Yeah.
So the Shoshone, the extended portion of the Shoshone,
Yeah,
Louis?
we're talking Shoshone County focal area. would there be hesitancy to use the southern part of Shoshone County because it's out of that polygon because it's the St. Joe Divide.
Yeah.
But there's values along the St. Joe River, and there's more and more homes being built down there.
You got Clarkia and the Clarkia area.
And there's a lot of private land down there too, that maybe that side could get looked at.
So I will say that's something that we would have to talk internal on the state side of the equation and Forest Service, because the shared stewardship effort, this is the designated landscape. So you see the yellow is where we stop most of our focal areas. That being said, that demonstration project, right, that we're so proud of, did happen outside of the focal area, and we ARA and TIRE fund a significant amount of work that's down out at the St. Mary's IDL office. So it would be easy for us to draw a polygon that basically encompasses the toe of the boot, I guess I'll call it, the northern landscape. And then we can have site-specific areas when we want to engage outside of that, but that would have to be something we just need to discuss internally on the IDL side. But like I said, just because we say we drew the boundary here and cut it off, there's nothing that prevents us from saying, hey, we've got an amazing opportunity over here, or maybe even over here where there's no Forest Service, but there's interested landowners. We can build off the footprint of other treatments and make a difference. We'll direct funds to those areas outside of what we designate, but this really puts Shoshone, what it's doing is it'll put Shoshone County on the map in relation to the shared stewardship effort, but we'll go beyond whatever boundary, but that's where the focus is primarily supposed to be invested.
And the program funds, though with emphasis in the shared stewardship landscape, are given, it doesn't preclude them from being extended or used outside of that as desired or needed. So if there was a community subdevelopment within Clarkia that said, hey, pick us because we're ready to go, and Bill wanted to put in monies for there, that's where the application would go. It would not keep us from applying for and seeking assistance for those individuals.
And even with that being said, I mean, we've got she's not in that position anymore, but we had a Good Neighbor Authority shared stewardship forester working on a GNA sale somewhere down south of this.
Somewhere here.
And it was close to another high risk that we were working on, IDL land. And evidently there's this relatively new neighborhood just going on like crazy.
Lindstrom?
Yeah, Lindstrom. That's the. And so she's like in our IDL St. Joe office trying to get the, some cross-boundary stuff going. And we're, I mean, she's contacting Tyre and me, and then she's trying to get down there, and we're really trying to work because, I mean, she's there. She's doing the Good Neighbor Authority work. She was doing the state sale work, and she's seeing all these new homes, and so are some of the other foresters.
Do you two mind if I backstep for just a moment? Because I think the next step is really to ask the commissioners whether or not this is something that you're interested in participating in. And if it is, then I think we can go to that next step. Do you think that there's value in that full engagement that we're talking about here?
I think you'd have our cooperation.
Excellent.
Thanks, Tyre.
Yeah.
And I think, to be clear, because I know we've had some concerns with other counties, not up north, but down south, we're here as a collective, and especially IDL, we're here to build, educate, and enhance the work that Bill will do for the county long term. Yes, we'll have some infusions of Bill or IRA funds, and there will be some temporary growth that's not sustainable, but ultimately, our role is to equip Bill and his program to get grant funds from now on and push this kind of private lands field reduction treatment work into the future.
I like it. This way we actually can have a future. Yeah.
That's the hope.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're in the
that.
Hey, when I retired the time I walked out the door, nobody knew. So I couldn't say anything.
But in all
Too
serious,
big of a figure now.
yeah. But that is a real part of the discussion as we push that fun factor, whether it's money to get it on the ground, CWDG, Joint Chiefs, or whatever. Having a group of people to talk like, hey, I've hit the fun factor, I'm at capacity or beyond. Then we can have the discussion about, okay, how do we address that? And that's one of the things that's been, I think, a good success is us just being transparent. Like, hey, we got landed the CWDG, and getting this money on the ground is going to require X, Y, and Z. I can cover X and Y, but if someone else needs to do Z, then we can figure that out.
Yeah.
But we're actually at the table to have the discussion.
Okay. So what do we need to do next? You've heard from us. We're in.
Well, I think if you're comfortable, well, I guess I would ask from you guys when it comes to identifying a focal area within Shoshone County, within the bounds of the shared stewardship footprint initially, and I'll have discussions about outside of that. Is there anyone in particular that you want to be at the table to have that discussion to modify the boundary? Because I know from the Forest Service we have them here. That's why they're here. This is a big contingent of the IDL representation, and we'll have BLM and NRCS. But whom from the county would you like to be there and to draft it, to present it to you as our proposed final? You guys can have the final thumbs up.
Bill's fine.
Bill.
Yeah, Bill will be
Thanks,
fine.
guys.
Yeah, we're very good.
But we can draft the proposal proposed, and when everyone kind of feels good about it, then we can get it on your guys' radar. And
Exactly.
if there's any concerns or we need to tweak it, we'll have that conversation.
Okay.
And then I'll work with Bill about setting up any meetings as appropriate in the future.
Okay.
I'll try to work with the group to get something pulled together by mid-December as far as what that draft polygon would look like. And that kind of aligns with CWDG. So maybe if we have a follow-up discussion, maybe we can just marry those two meetings together,
Okay.
if it makes sense. Does that sound good? Does that sound reasonable, or does anyone have any other recommendations on how else to do it?
So historically, you said that the southern area, you did actually extend the boundaries of that at some point.
I did.
So historically, it could be done up here as far as the St. Joe goes.
Yep. With the agreement of the state forester and our director, both an ideal, and the regional forester. I start to say foresters, I'm used to two, but just the regional forester out of Missoula. Those two agree, and we can do whatever they say we can do.
Okay.
And we didn't, it wasn't, helter-skelter. There was a lot of rationale about why they wanted to extend down into Boise County.
It
So
was a decent lift. That's why I say we probably need to have a discussion in-house, just because it was done, but it was about 1.5 years of work, and we could get work done just the same without having to change the boundary.
Okay.
But identifying as that collective group, no, we need to go to Clark. There's a good reason why, and then we're on board. But
Yeah.
definitely can figure out what that lift would be if that's something you really want to entertain.
ultimately, when it comes to putting CWDG, but especially the ongoing bread and butter of Western State Fire Managers or Hazardous Fuel Reduction Funds on the ground in Shoshone County, it's about where your CW, your Community Wildfire Protection Plan says that are your high risk areas. And every time you win a grant, Tire puts a big project, it's usually pretty big, landscape. This is where that money's gonna go, somewhere in here, and here's why. So those are the really guiding tenets of where most of your private land work can happen.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have anything that we need to add? I'm going to open it for public comment. Public comment today? Okay. Anything else, Bill? Holly? Good.
No, thank you.
Thank you guys for taking the time.
Thank
Yeah,
you
thank you.
for
Thank
giving
you.
us time to listen.
Appreciate it. It's been a productive day as far as my education goes. So, okay. All right. Well, with that, then we will stand adjourned.